Good evening. We have breaking news out of Minneapolis tonight. The FBI has successfully dismantled a major human trafficking network. We are awaiting details.
At 11:47 p.m. on a frozen Thursday night, the FBI director steps to a podium in Washington and delivers 6 words that will shatter the American conscience. We have dismantled a child harvesting network. Minneapolis, Minnesota. March 14th. Federal agents have just concluded the largest coordinated strike against human trafficking infrastructure in the upper Midwest's history. $12 million in illegal proceeds seized, 47 locations raided simultaneously across the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area. Over 300 federal agents from the FBI, ICE, DH, and specialized child exploitation task forces deployed in a single night. And at the center of it all, a name that was once untouchable, Hassan Deary, a so-called community leader, a humanitarian figurehead, a man who built mosques and funded schools while secretly orchestrating one of the most horrifying criminal enterprises ever discovered on American soil. This is not about drugs. This is not about money laundering in the traditional sense. This is about children, about organs, about a shadow economy so dark that even seasoned federal investigators had to step away from their screens and catch their breath. And if you think you know how deep corruption can go, you are not ready for what they found. 4:32 a.m. Minneapolis. The temperature is 11 degrees below zero. Fog rolls off the Mississippi River and clings to the empty streets of Cedar Riverside, one of the largest Somali immigrant neighborhoods in the United States. Neon signs flicker above shuttered shops. The only sound is the distant hum of a snowplow 2 blocks away. Then the silence breaks. 18 black Suburbans and armored tactical vehicles roll in from 4 directions. Headlights off, engines barely audible. FBI hostage rescue teams in full combat gear. ICE Special Response Units. DACE Homeland Security Investigations agents. SWAT operators from Minneapolis Metro, but only the ones who pass the federal vetting, the ones they know are clean. The target's a logistics company operating out of a warehouse on Washington Avenue, a medical supply distributor in Bloomington that has never once been audited, a nonprofit refugee resettlement agency with offices in St. Paul, a halal meat processing plant in Shakopee, a network of apartment complexes in the Cedar Riverside corridor, and a luxury townhouse in Edina, where Hassan Deary has lived for the past 9 years, hosting fundraisers, shaking hands with state senators, appearing on local news as the face of immigrant success. At exactly 4:32 a.m., every door is hit at once. Flashbangs shatter the frozen air. Battering rams splinter reinforced locks. Agents in black tactical helmets flood through doorways, red laser sights cutting through the darkness. At the warehouse, they find steel shipping containers marked as medical waste, but inside are refrigerated units, surgical tables, and rows of labeled biohazard bags. At the Bloomington facility, stacks of falsified organ donor consent forms, all signed with the same 3 handwriting styles, all backdated by months. At the nonprofit office, encrypted laptops still logged into offshore banking portals showing wire transfers to clinics in Mogadishu, Nairobi, and Istanbul. And at Hassan Deary's townhouse, federal agents find him in silk pajamas, calm, almost smiling, as if he has been expecting this moment for years. They also find a steel safe built into the floor of his home office. Inside, 4 external hard drives, 2 handwritten ledgers in Somali and English, and a satellite phone with a contact list that makes the lead FBI agent go pale. One of the hard drives is labeled Project Lifeline. It is anything but. 9:15 a.m. FBI Cyber Forensics Division. Minneapolis Field Office. A team of digital analysts works in a sealed room, surrounded by monitors glowing with decrypted files, transaction logs, and network diagrams that stretch across 3 wall-mounted screens. They crack the first hard drive in 40 minutes. What they see is a masterpiece of criminal architecture. a sprawling international network with over 200 operatives spanning 7 U.S. cities and 4 countries. Shell companies registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and South Dakota, fake medical charities, sham refugee aid organizations, logistics firms with names like New Horizon Transport, Unity Health Solutions, and Bridgepoint Relief Services. All of them trace back to a single encrypted command server hosted in Djibouti and controlled remotely by Hassan Deary. This is Project Lifeline. But it is not about saving lives. It is about harvesting them. The forensic team reconstructs the supply chain. Step 1. Vulnerable migrant children are identified through resettlement agencies, often unaccompanied minors, refugees with no surviving family, kids who fell through the cracks of a broken system. Step 2. They are placed into housing controlled by operatives within Deary's network. Step 3. Medical records are falsified to show pre-existing conditions or urgent need for surgery. Step 4. They are transported to cooperating clinics, some in the U.S., most overseas, where organs are extracted under the cover of emergency care. Hearts, kidneys, livers, corneas, even bone marrow. The ledgers show prices: a kidney, $85,000, a liver lobe, $120,000, a child's heart, rare and in demand for pediatric transplants abroad, $340,000. The files show names: buyers in Dubai, surgeons in Nairobi, brokers in Istanbul, and a disturbing number of transactions routed through medical tourism companies that advertise on social media, offering discounted organ transplants with no questions asked. But the worst discovery is buried deeper in the server logs. Automated messages sent every 2 weeks to an encrypted Signal account under the alias The Governor. Authorization codes for cross-border shipments, digital approvals for expedited medical transports, falsified state health inspection reports, and transfers totaling $12 million over 3 years, all flowing into offshore accounts linked to a sitting Minnesota state official who federal agents will only refer to in sealed documents as Subject Sigma. This is not a rogue community leader. This is state-enabled human butchery. One analyst leans back from his screen and mutters, he turned Minneapolis into a harvesting hub. And the operation is just beginning. 11 a.m. Federal Command Center. Hennepin County Emergency Operations Facility. A converted conference room now transformed into a tactical war room. A massive digital map of the Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area dominates the front wall, covered in pulsing red markers. Each one represents a known or suspected site in Hassan Deary's trafficking network. There are 63 of them. The mission commander, an FBI assistant director flown in from D.C., addresses a room packed with over 100 federal agents, ICE officers, DACE investigators, and select local law enforcement who have been vetted and cleared. He speaks with the calm authority of someone who has seen the worst humanity can offer. This is not a drug raid. This is not a financial crimes operation. This is a child rescue mission. We go in fast. We go in clean. And we bring every single one of those kids home. At 12:07 p.m., the largest multi-agency operation in Minnesota history kicks off. Over 1,000 federal agents, 74 SWAT teams, ICE Air Operations deploying 3 surveillance helicopters, D's mobile command units, FBI evidence response teams with mobile forensic labs, U.S. Marshals coordinating arrest warrants, and 2 Black Hawk helicopters circling the Twin Cities metro area, broadcasting encrypted mission updates to ground teams. They hit the network everywhere at once. In Cedar Riverside, agents storm an apartment complex where traffickers have been housing children in overcrowded units. 12 kids to a 2-bedroom space, no furniture, sleeping on mats, awaiting medical transports that will never return them. ICE officers find 11 children ages 7 to 15, malnourished, confused, clutching worn-out stuffed animals. Translators speak to them in Somali, Arabic, Amharic. Some of them haven't seen sunlight in weeks. In Bloomington, SWAT teams breached the medical supply warehouse. Inside, a hidden surgical suite complete with anesthesia equipment, operating lights, and a walk-in freezer filled with biohazard containers labeled as research samples. Forensic teams open one. Inside are preserved human organs, tagged with ID numbers that match children listed in Hassan Diri's ledgers. Some of those children are still missing. In Shakopee, federal agents surround the halal processing plant. The front half of the building is legitimate, processing lamb and beef for local markets. But the back half, accessible only by key card, contains a clandestine medical transport hub. Refrigerated trucks designed for organ shipments, forged shipping manifests, a dispatch log showing 72 trips to MISP International Airport over the past 18 months, timed perfectly with private charter flights bound for Nairobi, Djibouti, and Jeddah. At a luxury office building in downtown St. Paul, agents arrest 6 individuals, including 2 immigration attorneys, a case manager for a federally funded refugee program, and a physician's assistant who signed off on hundreds of fraudulent medical clearances. And in Edina, forensic teams tear through Hassan Diri's townhouse. They find a second server room hidden behind a false wall in the basement. Inside, live video feeds from apartments across the network, showing children in real time. Monitoring software tracking their locations, medical appointments, and travel schedules. And a messaging app where Diary communicated directly with buyers, negotiating prices, arranging transports, coordinating organ extractions. One message, dated 3 days ago, reads, "Heart available. Male. Age 9. AB positive, 360K, flight arranged." That child is found alive in a St. Paul apartment. He is transferred to a secure medical facility under federal protection. By 6:00 p.m., the network has been gutted. 47 locations raided, 83 arrests, 32 children rescued, over $4 million in cash seized, 12 vehicles impounded, and enough evidence to fill 18 pallets of boxes, all tagged, cataloged, and shipped to federal court. The underworld did not just take a hit. It was decapitated in broad daylight. But the corruption goes deeper than anyone imagined. Federal investigators begin combing through the seized servers, cross-referencing names, dates, and transactions. What they find is a parallel enforcement system, a shadow government operating within Minnesota's own institutions. 17 caseworkers within state-funded refugee resettlement agencies were on Hassan Diri's payroll, receiving monthly payments disguised as consulting fees. Their job: identify vulnerable children, expedite placements into network-controlled housing, and ensure that no follow-up visits were ever scheduled. 9 ICE deportation officers took bribes to delay or cancel deportation proceedings for key operatives, allowing them to remain in the U.S. and continue running the network. 4 Minnesota state health inspectors falsified reports, giving passing grades to facilities that should have been shut down immediately. One inspector received $18,000 over 2 years, deposited into a PayPal account under his daughter's name. 2 family court judges expedited custody transfers and sealed case files that should have triggered federal investigations. Their payments were routed through a fake nonprofit called Children's Futures Foundation, which existed only on paper and had Hassan Diri listed as a board advisor. And then there is Subject Sigma, the state official whose identity is still under seal. Investigators trace encrypted authorizations back to this individual, someone with access to state databases, someone who could override child welfare alerts, someone who could authorize cross-border medical transports without triggering Homeland Security flags. The working theory: a senior official within Minnesota's Department of Human Services or a connected legislator with oversight authority. One FBI case agent, a 22-year veteran, sits in a break room staring at a printout of the network chart and says this wasn't infiltration, this was installation. They built the system to feed the network. Honest officers, the ones who reported irregularities and were ignored, the ones who flagged missing children and were told to move on, they are brought into the investigation and finally heard. Some of them break down. One ICE agent, a father of 3, tells investigators, "I knew something was wrong. I knew it. But every time I pushed, I got shut down. They made me feel crazy. Now every supervisor, every department head, every official who looked the other way is under federal scrutiny. The badge is being rebuilt. The system is being purged, and for the first time in years, the truth is louder than the silence." But this network is not just local. It is continental. It is global. Zoom out from Minneapolis to the full scope of Project Lifeline. Federal agents mapped the routes. Children were moved through a sophisticated logistics chain designed to avoid detection at every level. From Minneapolis, operatives would transport children to Chicago, Detroit, or Columbus, where they would be handed off to second-tier couriers. From there, private charter flights booked through shell companies would carry them to international hubs: Nairobi, Mogadishu, Djibouti, Istanbul, and Dubai. Shipping manifests were altered by corrupt freight handlers at MSP International Airport. Customs declarations listed the children as accompanied minors traveling for medical treatment, complete with forged parental consent forms and fake travel visas. Way stations along interstate trucking routes were avoided through pre-planned schedules shared via encrypted apps. When convoys had to pass through border checkpoints or security screenings, cooperating officers were paid to wave them through without inspection. And the most chilling discovery, Hassan Diri was not working alone. The forensic team identifies communication between Diri and operatives in Seattle, Atlanta, and Houston, suggesting that Project Lifeline was only one node in a much larger transnational trafficking cartel with roots in East Africa and branches across the United States. One decrypted file is titled Expansion Plan Phase the 3. It outlines a strategy to establish similar networks in Portland, Denver, and Phoenix within the next 5 years. The goal: turn refugee resettlement cities into permanent harvesting zones, exploiting gaps in federal oversight, local coordination, and immigrant community trust. This is not opportunistic crime. This is strategic empire building. One federal prosecutor summarizes it in a single line: they wanted to industrialize child trafficking, and they almost succeeded. So what does this mean? It means that power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it hides behind charity, behind smiling press conferences and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, behind the language of compassion and community. Hassan Diri was called a leader, a humanitarian, a bridge builder. He funded mosques. He sponsored youth programs. He appeared on panels about immigrant integration. And while he smiled for the cameras, children were disappearing. While he shook hands with politicians, organs were being sold. While he collected awards for his service, families were being destroyed. This is the cost of silence. This is what happens when systems are designed to trust titles instead of track results. This is what happens when red flags are ignored because someone is too well connected, too politically sensitive, too useful to the narrative. The FBI estimates that over 200 children passed through Project Lifeline's network between 2021 and 2024. 32 have been rescued. The rest are still missing, scattered across continents, lost in a system that treated them as inventory. 200 children, 200 futures, 200 families who may never know what happened. This is not a story about one man. This is a story about what we allow to happen when we stop asking questions, when we stop demanding accountability, when we let influence replace integrity. If you are still watching this, tap the like button so more people see this story. Share it. Comment expose if you believe corruption like this must be dragged into the light, no matter how powerful the people involved. Because the only thing more dangerous than a criminal network is a society that refuses to look at it. Hassan Diri is in federal custody awaiting trial on over 100 counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, and crimes against children. His network has been destroyed, his operatives are facing decades in prison, and the children who survived are beginning the long, painful process of healing. But the system that enabled him, that is still being dismantled. That investigation is still ongoing. And the name Subject Sigma is still sealed, protected by legal motions and political pressure. So ask yourself, who benefits from that silence? And what are you willing to do to break it?